Hadi boli. Devlet elimizde, devlet elimizde akşamı.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back. Happy Friday the 13th. Today is Friday, September 13th, 2024, and I figured I couldn't think of a better way to make a Friday the 13th video than to just talk about my ranking of the Friday the 13th movies, right? Is there a better way to do it? I can't think of it. And a couple, little disclaimers kind of heading into this ranking. To me, I consider myself a fan of every Friday the 13th movie. There's some stuff that I really like in a lot of them. There's some stuff that I really don't like, but the stuff I don't like is a little bit nitpicky. Honestly, this ranking is more least favorite to most favorite, because to me, every entry in this franchise has merit and is enjoyable and is fun. Yeah, I'm even talking about you, Jason Takes Manhattan. So for me to say, hey, I think this is the worst to the best, that just doesn't work. I enjoy all of them. So we're going to be talking about the good and the bad of all of them, because I think they all have a little bit of each. And there might be, I think for the most part, there's one or two decisions in here that people might be like a little, that's a little bit of a crazy placing, but that's okay. I mean, my ranking is not the definitive ranking. Your ranking is not the definitive ranking. This is just my favorites, and this changes every couple years that I rewatch the Friday 13th franchise. I end up changing that. I go from movies that were my least favorite go to my favorite, and movies that were my favorite go to least favorite, and back and forth and back and forth. So let's just jump right in. Let's chat about Friday the 13th for a little bit. But before we get into the main franchise, I want to talk about a couple bonus pieces that I have that I own on physical that have to deal with the Friday the 13th franchise that I think you should check out, and I encourage you to. And the first one being Crystal Lake Memories. This is how long is this thing? 400-minute long documentary based on the book that came out a couple years prior. There is and will never be a more definitive Friday the 13th documentary on record than this right here. Everything you could possibly want and need to learn is in here. Tons of interviews, great information on what happened with the MPAA with most of these films. Just a lot of in-depth stuff in this documentary. And it's a great companion piece. So the way that I approached when Screen Factory had put out the franchise collection on Blu-ray a couple years back, I had watched the movie and then I threw this in and just went to that chapter where they covered this movie. And it was such a good just companion piece. I created just this massive week-long experience with it. So Crystal Lake Memories, this is usually teamed up with Never Sleep Again, the Elm Street Legacy on Blu-ray, another fantastic franchise behind-the-scenes documentary. So check this out. And then again, I'm not officially putting these in the ranking, but I did want to talk about, because these are very, very good, Vince DiSanti's Never Hike Alone and Never Hike in the Snow. I know there's a new one now. There's a Never Hike Alone 2, I think. I just haven't gotten it yet. But these are great fan films. Probably the best production value as far as fan films go possible. There's a lot of love in these. If you're a Friday the 13th film or fan, I think you're really, really, really going to enjoy these like I did. I personally prefer Never Hike Alone more than Never Hike in the Snow. But it's really cool to see Tom Matthews back as Tommy Jarvis in these. So check those out if you get a chance. And now into the nitty gritty. And we're starting with my least favorite Friday the 13th movie. 1988's The New Blood, Chapter 7. Now, this movie's notorious for being the kickoff of the Kane Hodder era of the Friday the 13th franchise, right? And I think Kane Hodder is the best part of this movie. And this is a movie that, if we had done this video 10 years ago, this might have been in my top 3, honestly. Just over the years, I've learned to really love some other entries, and this just kind of keeps pushing back a little bit. But super super cool concept here, where basically you have Jason Voorhees versus Carrie White, right? Except Carrie White is Tina, and I kind of enjoy spending more time with Carrie White than I do with Tina. She's been through trauma. She's developed these psychic powers. She's not a very enjoyable character to be with. In fact, Terry Kaiser's Dr. Cruz is more fun to be around a little bit that he shows up in the movie. You know what I mean? And the main, I think, bonus of this movie is when you get to the end where she really unlocks the psychic powers and you have Jason Voorhees shooting across rooms and banging against walls and all kinds of stuff. Like, that is a ton of fun to see. It's just everything kind of leading up to it. I'm just not. I don't love the characters. The death scenes in this movie were absolutely butchered by the MPAA to the point where you could barely consider them scraps. What's left here, and I'm not saying that the gore is why we watch these movies, or am I? But that's a big part of it. I mean, we watch these movies to watch the kills, and when those are butchered, for lack of a better word, you're just kind of left with not much else, in my opinion. Now, this was directed by John Carl Buechler, who we lost a couple of years ago in 2019. He was a makeup effects artist who worked on movies like Reanimator and Adam Green's Hatchet and stuff like that. Incredible makeup effects artist. Very competent director. I think visually, New Blood is very, very good. It's just not one that I enjoy revisiting often, and that's why it's kind of my least favorite, honestly. So my second least favorite comes I don't think this is much of a surprise. It is Jason Takes Manhattan. Okay, I try my best not to look at what movies could be, the potential that was there that we did not get, because at the end of the day, we're never going to get that, and we will spend an eternity talking about what it could have been. And every single video I've ever seen on this franchise in my entire adult life jokes about how little, or how clickbaity, how little the Manhattan part of this title is actually in the movie, right? People say this should have been retitled to Jason Takes a Boat to Vancouver, because it was shot in Vancouver for the most part. And I get all of that, right? It is cool to kind of see Jason on a big boat killing people. That's cool, you know, killing people with guitars and hanging out on dance floors, right? That's a lot of fun. And I don't think it's not, you know, absolutely terrible. It just, to me, it gets a laugh. It's not the best. I mean, when we do get to Manhattan, there's that one sequence that was shot in Manhattan where Jason is in the middle of Times Square, and that is worth the price of entry alone on this movie, I think. But Kane Hodder, his second entry as Jason Voorhees, brings more life to this character than ever before. This movie really shows off his size, the wide stance. It's like a very threatening presence. And I think, you know, the back alleyways of Vancouver trying to sell as New York, it's fine. Like, it's all just fine. I can have a couple of drinks and I can have a really good time with this and not think too much of it. I really just wish, if you sit down and you watch this movie and you go, man, this would have been so much cooler if they were actually in New York, you're just never ever going to look at it for what it is, for what we got. And even though it is my second least favorite, it's this far down the ranking, like I said in the beginning, it's still a ton of fun. I find a lot of merit in it. And I just enjoy it, right? To me, it's not a bad movie. It's just not in the top tier of the franchise. I would still watch this over a lot of other slasher movies, some big franchise slasher movies from this time. So for me, Jason Takes Manhattan, it's fun. That's really about it. It's fun. So up next, let's talk about what I think is one of the more unexpected this low in the ranking titles. Steve Miner's Friday the 13th Part 3. And yes, I know, this is the movie where Jason finds his hockey mask. I get it, right? That's cool. Me, personally, every single time I think about this movie, I think about three things. Larry Zerner's character, Shelley, who is the man. Freaking love that guy. I need that guy in my friends group. I think about the 3D, the all of the visible wires that you can see in most of the 3D gags. That's okay. It's okay. 1982. It's okay. I'm fine with it. It's a freaking 3D movie. You know what I mean? And then the third thing that I think about is how a movie this low in a ranking has some of my favorite kills in the franchise, right? To me, it is the handstand kill that takes the absolute cake, walking around on his hands, chopped it in half, I guess is the way that you could say, right? But still, it's one of my favorite kills in the entire franchise. And it's shot so well with the glass floor so you can see the body and the blood fall on it. It's a good time, right? But part 3, to me, it falls really heavy into the gimmicks. And when I get into kind of scenes like... I always just feel a little underwhelmed by it, I guess you could say. I thought it was really cool bringing like the motorcycle gang who's going to come back and seek vengeance on Shelley's mishaps, and they just get butchered in the barn. But really, outside of that, there isn't too much about this movie I tend to want to really go back to, if that makes any sense. It's one of those movies where I'm perfectly fine just being like, I want to watch a group of people that I don't care about outside of Shelley get butchered, which is how most people, I think, outside of genre lovers think of these movies. To me, that's how I think of this, and I think it's just a lot of fun, right? And I get why they did the 3D. This did change the course of Jason Voorhees as a character with the finding of the hockey mask. But yeah, it's just kind of fun, but I don't take a lot from it. You know what I mean? It's just not the most exciting entry to me, and that's why it kind of ends up just sort of on the bottom half. So that's Steve Miner's Friday the 13th Part 3. So next up, we have 1985's A New Beginning, which to me is the most confusing of the bunch, right? After poor returns from Friday the 13th Part 4, it kind of seemed like things were dying out, so a change needed to be made. So they made a Friday the 13th movie where a character dresses like Jason, moves like Jason, looks like Jason, kills like Jason. And they set up a couple weird red herrings in the process, and then they were like, it's a new beginning. I don't know. There's also a really weird, to me, Final Chapter is a fairly serious movie. Yes, I mean, you can't really say serious movie and picture Crispin Glover's dancing and the same thing, but I think there's a radical shift in tone from 4 to 5. We kind of went from this is fun to fart jokes, and that's kind of what happens here in A New Beginning. Of course, we have adult Tommy Jarvis, and he's the big red herring here. Spoiler for anybody who hasn't seen these movies. I don't know why you're watching a ranking if you've never seen these. He's an adult here, and everybody suspects him to be just this really odd guy. He's weird. He's freaky. He's having nightmares. He just gives me bad vibes. If I bumped into Tommy Jarvis on the street, getting bad vibes from him. But he's set up as this red herring. This movie opens with an axe killing at a camp over a chocolate bar. There's a scene later on where we go and we meet. I think is it Reggie's brother, who then farts while going to the bathroom in a outhouse. There's a lot of just weird stuff in A New Beginning, honestly. I've always liked the kills and the violence in this movie, especially the character who gets the belt wrapped around his head and that's sucked in. That was always very terrifying to me, but the MPAA, again, just absolutely tore this movie apart and left nothing really much for us to enjoy, right? But I think turning out, Roy's okay. In the end, you're like, okay, I just watched a Friday 13th movie without Jason. It was the paramedic whose son got killed in the beginning. What's new about this? What did it do that was new? And obviously nothing, because we went on to a much better movie where Jason is brought back to life. So part 5 to me, I still find a lot of enjoyment in it. A lot of enjoyment. I think Reggie is awesome. I don't mind Pam as a final girl. I actually like her a lot. I think it's really cool. I think she's cool. I think her and Reggie are great. And I love the fight at the end, that final encounter with the barn and the tractor and everything. So I have a lot of fun with 5. Just not my favorite. And honestly, moving forward, this is the last of the, I enjoy those. From here on, these are all movies I really, really, really enjoy. This is kind of the last of the meh era of this little ranking here. So coming in at 7th for me is 1993's Jason Goes to Hell. Complicated story for me with this one. When I was a kid going to the video stores, Jason Goes to Hell, this was the cover I saw the most of, right? See, I saw the original poster for the original Friday 13th, but Jason Goes to Hell at that time was the I don't even want to say the newest, because when did Jason X come out? 2002. Jason X was the newest, but the one that I hadn't seen until I was older was Jason Goes to Hell. I just kept seeing this cover and I was interested, and it took me a long time to finally see it. I want to say it was about, I'm 33 now. I had to say it was probably about 10 years ago I finally saw Jason Goes to Hell. I had heard nothing but terrible things about it. I heard it was kind of shunted from the franchise. It's just so radically different. I kept hearing, oh, Jason's not even in it. Yeah. I've come around to really, really loving this movie. A little bit as a Friday 13th movie. I think outside of that, this is a very, very, very gross sort of semi-body horror film. Like, this movie has a different level to the violence that we've never gotten in the franchise before, right? You could say, hey, that makes sense. It's so separated from the franchise, very loosely attached. And I would agree. But if you're still like, I haven't seen Jason Goes to Hell in years, I gotta watch it again, give it another run, honestly. Like, I kind of want to go and get Voorhees burgers, right? Like, I kind of want that. Just people munching on Jason's heart. There's all kinds of like really gross stuff in this movie, especially towards the end. And then the introduction of you know, the Necronomicon and just all kinds of crazy stuff in this movie. They just kind of threw everything at the kitchen counter, including the Voorhees burgers. And we got, you know, Jason Goes to Hell. And honestly, to me, I keep having more fun with it. The more years that go by, the more I enjoy it. And I'm okay with that. Really, really actually okay with that. I will say, I think it was a little late in the franchise to try something radically different. You know, this is in the 90s. Slasher movies were pretty dead at that time. And I think that's why this goes a little bit beyond the slasher. It tries to really get into that. To me, it kind of feels like a bit of like a Stuart Gordon film, but everybody else might disagree with me. The one thing I will say, my favorite kill of the entire franchise, hands down the entire franchise, is the tent kill in this. When the two people are getting it on the tent, the blade comes through and he just right up. So good. Such a brutal scene. I love it so much. If you're still on the fence about Jason Goes to Hell, give it another run. I love it, and I have a feeling if I do this ranking again in 5 more years, this might be much, much higher than it is now. So 9 years after Jason X, 2002, we finally get Jason on the big screen again. And it's Jason X. And to me, I rented this movie a ton. Like 2002, I was 11. So only a couple years later was I really, really, really starting to dive into horror. And this was one that I watched a bunch. Mostly because I think my parents found this to be pretty tamed for a Friday 13th movie in comparison to the earlier entries. And I don't really know why they thought that, because I would just play the camp scene over and over and over again as a kid, because that's what you do, right? But to me, this was on constant rotation, right? It's super cool. David Cronenberg's in the beginning, he gets killed. We get the really cool ice face freeze and smash, and one of the most recognizable kills in the franchise, I think. Uber Jason is cool as shit. Kane Hodder just owns it, right? Just makes it super duper cool. My problems with this movie are more so just like there is really no atmosphere to it. You kind of get this very blank palette where like everything is just sort of flat. Like there's this weird contrast with the shadows and the lighting that just kind of give this appearance that there's not much effort in it. It doesn't really feel like there's much effort put into the color grading. Everything is just sort of meh, which is weird because you're in space, which I feel like would be one of the easiest places to create some type of atmosphere, but they didn't really pull it off. It's also my least favorite Harry Manfredini score of the entire franchise. But yeah, Jason X is a ton of fun. This is like, give me 4 beers and a whiskey, and I'll just absolutely have a blast with this one. So Jason X falls kind of right in the middle of the ranking for me. Man, Joseph Zito brings the noise in 1984's The Final Chapter. This was another one that, as years have gone on, this crept its way up to being a favorite of mine. I went down. Crept its way up to becoming a favorite of mine. Mostly because, introduction of Tommy Jarvis, Corey Feldman, he makes cool masks. I remember as a kid being like, man, that kid really made all of those. And then I was like, no, obviously not. Just it's a movie. But Final Chapter was always so much fun to me. You can talk about Crispin Glover's dance scene. This is kind of the start of, I think, the MPAA just really, really, really butchering these movies because the kills are really cool. I just like they're pretty chopped up. I love Crispin Glover's death scene though, with the cork in the hand or the cork opener, and then the blade to the thing. There's just really, really cool stuff. And the Final Chapter is just fun, right? It's just a lot of fun. It moves at breakneck pace. And it just lines up a bunch of people we really don't like, and they get killed off in cool ways. Sort of the epitome of what this franchise is, and kind of like what slasher films are meant to be for me. And come on, I wish once in my life I would be as cool as Corey Feldman, shaving his head haphazardly to walk downstairs and confront Jason Voorhees. I wish I could ever be that cool. But we do get one of the, I think, most iconic special effects in this movie when at the end with Tom Savini's Jason Voorhees, the machete goes in the side of the head. Jason falls over, hits the blade, or the bottom of the machete hits the ground, and he slides down it with everything moving. One of the coolest effects of the franchise. I mean, and Tom Savini, every single video I watch of him talking about what his favorite things to do were, that's always on there. So the Final Chapter, a ton of fun. Corey Feldman rules in this era. Jason Voorhees rules. I love the Final Chapter. Absolutely love it. So now into my top 5, and we're finally going to talk about the one that started it all, Friday the 13th. Sean Cunningham. The behind the scenes, or like the conversations about the lead up to this movie, are insane. They just wanted to create a concept that makes money. They were inspired by Halloween. They literally created the title and then created an advertisement around it. It didn't even have a movie yet. Didn't have a script. Didn't have anything. So it's a miracle that this ended up being made in the first place. So he says in multiple interviews, it's a miracle that there's even working audio and working video. But to me, obviously I love the original Friday the 13th, right? I do. It's a landmark. If you want to talk about Halloween paved the road and Friday the 13th ran on it. And it's the most iconic of the franchise. Obviously with Kevin Bacon being in here and his death scene. There actually used to be, so funny story, way back in the day, arrowinthehead.com, which was the horror section of Joe Blow, they had this kill of the day that they would post these like wave files of, and every day they would post a new kill, and me as a kid I would go in and download them and watch them, and it could be anywhere from like a minute to a couple seconds. And I remember they made a huge deal about posting the uncut Kevin Bacon death scene because in the theatrical version of this movie that was cut out, or it wasn't cut out, it was just cut short because of the iconic, the blood had stopped pumping, so he put his mouth over the pipe, and that's how the blood really, gushed out of there. But to me, that's the most iconic moment here. The ending with Betsy Palmer showing up, I think she brings a level of sympathy and care for a character we never get again in this franchise. We feel bad for her, but at the same time, like, she's doing really, really, really awful things, and I think that's a great dilemma to bring up. Is kind of like, you're like, yeah, she's a murderer. I've been watching her murder people this whole movie, but they did kind of let her disfigured kid drown. Not these campers, previous campers. You know, it is what it is. To me, though, I think while Friday the 13th laid that groundwork, there was just a couple other movies that in this franchise that just did it a little bit better. They're just more interesting, better characters, better kills, which is okay. It doesn't take away what this original did. Just some did it better. So for me, Friday the 13th kicks off the top 5, but the next 4 or 3 of the 4, one of them I'm not really going to consider. 3 of the 4, 2 of the 4, which follow this, just gotta do it better. So my 4th favorite Friday the 13th film is, I would say, about 2/3 of Friday the 13th film. I'm talking about Freddy vs. Jason. To me, this is mostly a Nightmare on Elm Street film. That was my dog's ears you just heard. This is mostly a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. New line behind this. I think they put most of the focus on that, being that Jason in this movie is merely a puppet for Freddy Krueger. But I cannot talk about this franchise without talking about, without talking about the impact this had on me as a 12, 13-year-old seeing this in the theaters, my aunt renting it at home years later. This movie meant so much to me, and still to this day is the most fun I think I could ever really have with a slasher movie. Ronnie Yu directs the hell out of this, brings a ton of style. My wife and I quote this movie all the time, which I have a bunch of fun with it. And I'm okay saying that I think this movie's pretty cornball cheesy. I mean, there's some bad stuff in here. I can't tell you how much I hate the nose scene in The Nurse where he got your nose. I fucking hate that. I can't stand that shit. But it all is okay at the end when you have Jason and Freddy standing in front of each other. Freddy just eyes wide at the stature and the size of Jason here. And I think Jason here was played by, I couldn't remember offhand what his name was. Ken Kirzinger. Massive individual. Massive individual. But that whole fight scene when you get into the construction site where Freddy, man, the torpedoes, and he's flipping the oxygen, the compression tanks at him, and there's just, my favorite being when he goes to push the dirt thing off the top, and it gets stuck, and he just goes, "Oh, give me a break." I don't know. I just love this movie. I always love this movie. So yeah, it's just a lot of fun, and the soundtrack too. For me, growing up a metalhead, this soundtrack, you Mushroom Head, Killswitch Engage, just all kinds of great stuff on the soundtrack for Freddy vs. Jason. Yeah. Oh man. And what's his name calling Jason a corn poke? That's awesome. So if you're ever around my wife and I for any extended amount of time and you want to get into a casual conversation about horror franchises, one thing you'll hear us talk about is our total disagreement on this next movie. I said earlier that I think Friday the 13th is a great movie. I just think some of the sequels did it better. She thinks that the original Friday the 13th is the best. It's the one that started all. Me, I'm going to talk about Friday the 13th Part 2 all day. To the point where I even met Harry Manfredini, and I bought a La La Land Records release CD of him for the soundtrack of Friday the 13th Part 2, and I had him sign the Friday the 13th to me and Part 2 to my wife, which is always my favorite story to tell. But Steve Miner's directorial premiere, this movie doesn't make much sense. It only takes place a couple years after the events of the first movie. Jason is a full-grown adult, right? Full-grown adult. He stalks her to her house and kills her at her house. And then now we just have a bunch of new camp members at the camp. And did I say that? What did I say there? I don't know. I said something that made sense. The girl from the first movie follows her. What is her name? Follows her to her house. Kills her. That's how the movie starts, right? We're getting rid of an original character. Alice. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot. I stopped the camera and I sat here for a minute and I was like, what is happening? Alice. We see him kill her at her house. Well, we see somebody, because at this time, Jason Voorhees is not introduced as somebody who's even still alive, right? So we see somebody go to the house, kills Alice. We cut to a new group of camp counselors at Crystal Lake, and boom, there's Jason. Sackhead Jason. Arguably my favorite version of Jason Voorhees. He looks so cool with the potato sack on the head. But Friday the 13th Part 2 just does things better. It kind of like takes that formula to me and gives it a little more gas, a little more spark, kind of ups everything as you should with the sequel. But in this case, I think just played with that, took that groundwork and said, hey, how do we amp this up a little bit, add some heat, and it did it. I mean, you know, when I think about Friday the 13th Part 2, I can't help but think about, and I don't remember his name offhand, the character who's in a wheelchair, and he gets the blade to the head, and then we cut to about 5 seconds of shots of him rolling lifeless in the wheelchair down the largest set of steps I've ever seen in my life. That's brutal, man. I mean, even if it's not outright the most violent kill, that's brutal. So I think Friday the 13th Part 2, it's just a ton of fun. I think it just does things better. I always enjoy when I rewatch the franchise. I love watching the first Friday the 13th. I put on Part 2 and I just have the time of my life, which seems to be a common theme with all of these movies, right? It's just having fun. So for me, the top 3 kicks off with Steve Miner's Friday the 13th Part 2. I will say I'm very happy to be on YouTube and talking about movies in the era of re-looking at movies that we once thought were bad and reanalyzing them, right? Which I think sometimes is not good, but, you know, we saw House of Wax get this kind of reappraisal where people love it with Jared Padalecki. Great movie. Let's talk about that. We saw Texas Chainsaw 03 get a ton of attention again. People were like, man, this movie actually rules. Same with like Sorority Row and a bunch of remakes from that time that people are like really, really, really into now that we're going back and revisiting them. And to me, I think my favorite of the bunch, coming from Marcus Nispel of Texas Chainsaw 03, is 2009's Friday the 13th. Listen, everything I could have wanted out of a Friday the 13th remake, I think I got. And in fact, I got a little bit more than that, too. Like, the kills in this movie are brutal. I mean, I hate some of the CGI that's in them. I'm sorry. I do. But I can kind of get past it. I have that affection to it. Every single time I put it on, like, I think my delivery of the Arrow 4K for this is coming, like, on Tuesday. I can't wait. I cannot wait to revisit this. I hate every single character outside of Jared Padalecki, his character in this movie. I hate everybody else. I just want to see them get killed, and I get that. And that's delivered on. And it's violent. It's brutal. There's a heavy hand. And to me, the slow-moving Jason Voorhees is still scary, right? To most standard audiences, though, I think they've had enough of that. We've seen that enough. We needed to have a little bit more tenacity, a little more adrenaline, a little bit more of like, I call it like a hungry dog style, and we get that. Like, Jason Voorhees sprints, outright runs in this movie. This guy has got a lot of emotion. Derek Mears puts so much personality into Jason in this, and I think it's great. A lot of fun. I think he makes Jason scary again, at least to me. Maybe not to you, but at least to me. I think really the only fall this movie has is that it comes from an era where they have to over-explain everything. We get this super crazy amount of backstory and all of this stuff, which you just don't really need. I think that could have taken... Yeah, I think the extended cut is 106 minutes. I think you could have gotten this down into under 95 minutes without a lot of that, and I don't think it would detract a lot from the storytelling. But Friday the 13th 09 is my second favorite Friday the 13th movie, which is like, some people are going to be like, dude, what the hell? No, it's great. And honestly, the Steve Jablonsky score that's here, I think it's Steve Jablonsky, right? Yeah, Steve Jablonsky. His score here is great. I love the music in this movie. So, yeah. Only one left to talk about. I'm just gonna, I'm not going to cut. Let's talk about Friday the 13th, Part 6. Tom McLaughlin. Rock and roll, dude. Every single time I think about this movie and I think about Tom McLaughlin, all I think about, or McLaughlin, is just rock and roll. Every single time I think about this movie, and in my head I just go... I just go like this. That's all I want to do. To me, I think just beginning to end, this movie is smile on my face. Just moving at 100 miles per hour. The opening scene with them reawakening Jason, his reintroduction, making him supernatural, like really leaning into that element. They were super aware of what they were trying to do with this, and they really leaned into it. And you have a bunch of characters in here that are just pure scumbags. People were doing cocaine, and it's just rock and roll, man. This movie's so much fun. Yeah, the adult Tommy Jarvis is great. I think, too, as far as... I think a lot of times the death of Jason Voorhees is always very like, nah, okay. I think it's super smart to just trap him at the bottom of the lake. Like, just put a big ass rock and a chain on him and put him at the bottom of Camp Crystal Lake. That's it. Super simple. Hard to pull off. Very difficult to pull off. But a super simple way to kind of put a bookend on the franchise at this point, because then you're going into new blood. I think this movie, McLaughlin, the team, understood that after A New Beginning, audiences just needed to fall in love again with this character and have fun, right? Like, go to the movies, it's date night, you're with your friends, you're just trying to have a good time. They understood that. They got the message. And that's how we get Friday the 13th, Part 6. Jason Lives, my favorite, the most fun Friday the 13th movie in the entire franchise. I'm about to throw this on right now, man, and watch it again. I freaking love this movie. So there it is, guys. There is my entire ranking of the Friday the 13th franchise. I didn't do a lot of prep for this. I just kind of was like, I'm going to talk about these movies. I'm not a critic. I don't come on here. I'm not giving, like, to me, these movies, I think people think super deeply into them, and that kind of detracts from the experience of kind of what you're intended to. People watch these movies in the same vein that they'll watch, Citizen Kane or Casablanca or, like, The Godfather, or like Oppenheimer, right? Like, these massive, massive things. They put them on the same rating scale, and that just doesn't work. You can't do that. Right? Friday the 13th, to me, if I'm putting on a Friday the 13th movie, I'm just ready for boobs, blood, and Jason Voorhees. Right? So, that's what I want. And I know we talked about some issues these movies have. There are glaring issues, but at the end of the day, I'll throw on any one of these and I'll have a good time. And that's okay with me. I don't need to have ones that I hate to juxtapose the ones that I love. Right? I don't need that. So, to me, I just love the entire franchise. And like I said, that was my least favorite to most favorite, all favorites. So, thank you for hanging out. Happy Friday the 13th. Most of all, that's the most important part here. It's Friday the 13th. Be safe. My wife and I are going to see Hans Zimmer in Baltimore, so we're going to have a great time with that. I hope you guys do something fun. Go to Spirit of Halloween or something. Go do something. Don't go to no haunted houses or anything. You know, stay away from lakes in general. Don't resurrect the dead. Don't do any of that. Just, you know what? Stay home. Don't stay home. 9 o'clock curfew tonight. Stay home. Thank you for hanging out, guys. I'll catch y'all next time.